Okay, I'll start. Can you hear me fine? So I'm Uli Tayer. I'm from, I work for Red Hat.
Can you put the microphone closer?
Yes.
Because it doesn't work, yeah.
Is it better now? I'm not sure it's...
Sure it's turned down?
Yeah, it is. Yes.
Yeah, it was on mute. Now I hear it. How is it now? Okay. Okay. So I'm Uli Tayer. I work for Red Hat, currently in the container management team. And the topic of this presentation is automating your data center with Ansible and ManageIQ. And there will be a Q&A session in the end, but you can also interrupt me if you want. So the agenda for today is first, I will give some motivation and present the problem that we wanted to solve. I will then go on to describe ManageIQ and Ansible, which are key players in this solution. The core of this talk will be presenting ManageIQ Ansible modules. And we will discuss ManageIQ automation engine and the current state of integration inside ManageIQ with Ansible. And then we will mention some items from the roadmap. So as I said, I work in the container management team. And our team's mission is to provide a solution for container management for running containers in clustered environments based on OpenShift and Kubernetes. And an example of what that means is there is a team inside Red Hat called the OpenShift Ops, whose mission is to manage a large number of containers, of clusters, who are paid for by customers. These are customers who want to enjoy all the benefits of an environment like OpenShift, but they don't want to have to deal with the overhead of managing such a cluster. And we started talking to those guys a few months back. They are really an awesome team, and we've learned a lot of stuff from them. So we try to understand what they need. So the first thing that they need is when they need to deploy and provision a new cluster, obviously they need some kind of consistent way of doing that, because the environment is quite complex, as you will see. They need a very fine-grained solution for monitoring where they can define exactly the kind of triggers that they want or what kind of situation they're looking to be notified on. They also need all kinds of metrics to understand workloads and utilization. And both of these items are achieved using a Hocular time series database that is running inside the cluster. So time series database is the right kind of database for metrics. Basically, every row is a timestamp and a value. They also need aggregated logging from all of the hosts, both for infrastructure and for the application logging. For that, they are using an Elasticsearch cluster, also deployed inside the environment. They need to deal with charging customers, which is basically related to measuring because it involves connecting some kind of cost to a metric. It can be a physical cost, a physical thing, like CPU or memory, and it can be something virtual, because maybe you want to charge based on the usage of a certain container image. And there's a lot more, and it's very obvious that we need very good automation here. And that's what this talk is about. So let's take a step back and talk about the role in general of an ops team today. So you can see organizations today consume a multitude of platforms from different sources for different purposes. And if you don't have one place where you can look at it all and make sense, it might be very hard to manage. And this is what ManageIQ entails. So one open source platform to rule them all. ManageIQ is an open source management platform for hybrid IT. It is the open source project that powers Red Hat CloudForms. And it's basically a single pane of glass where you can look at all of your VMs, containers, storage, network. The first thing that you get is a rich inventory, which is up to date, and it's cross-linked, which means that if you have like a Kubernetes cluster running on top of OpenStack VMs, you will be able to drill down from an individual container to the VM on which it is running and to the host. ManageIQ collects performance and utilization data from all of your environment, which enables you to understand your workloads, to do capacity planning, find unused resources. And that also includes reporting based on performance and chargeback, which is kind of the billing that we talked about. Smart state analysis is the name that we give to the ability to inspect objects in real time. I'll give you an example from the container world, is that we can mount a container image inside the cluster, and we can figure out what's running inside, including packages, and we can also test it against latest CVE data using OpenSCAP. So we can find out if there are any vulnerabilities in a container image. Compliance is the ability to define in free language certain conditions that can say if an object is compliant or not, and also take action on it. So another example from containers is mixing up with the previous items. We can define a policy that says when a new container image is discovered in the cluster, scan it. If it has any CVEs of, let's say, high severity, mark it as non-compliant. We can also get OpenShift not to run that image after that. Service catalog is a bundled list of resources where end user can consume resources so that the user can just order a VM for himself and he doesn't have to open a ticket for IT. And tenancy and role-based access control means that all of the previous items are like an admin can fine-grain who can do what, who can see what, etc. And there is the automation engine, which I'll get more into in a few minutes. So let's talk about providers. It's a key abstraction in ManageIQ. Basically, each provider is like a source of information, and they are modular. So first, they are modular in the sense that each provider abstracts all the logic of talking to one external system, as well as understanding its objects. And it's also modular, and the community has been working hard lately at separating the different providers to different repositories so that each provider can have their own release and like development lifecycle. And we actually have people from the different communities working on their provider. So we have guys from Ovirt working on the Ovirt provider. We have guys from Ansible working on the Ansible provider, etc. So providers are divided to categories. This is not a complete list, by the way. I just got tired of clicking around in my development environment, but you have your cloud providers. You have your infrastructure providers. You have your containers providers, storage, middleware providers, network providers, and configuration. You can see Ansible Tower is here in this category. So a few nice pictures. This is the container provider dashboard, so it's a specific provider. And what you can see here are different objects that come from this cluster. These are like container or Kubernetes-related entities. You can see aggregated node utilization as well as per node. Take a look that here there's a very busy node. And another interesting thing, like example, is that you can see pod creation and deletion trends, because Kubernetes is very good at figuring out if a container crashed somehow and starting it on a different node. But if that happens a lot suddenly, you might want to know about it. This is the topology view, which is kind of the best place to get a bird's eye view on all of the objects in your system. So you can see here, remember the like busy node, you can see this is our provider. This is a node which is running one pod, which is running one container. And this is another node, which is the super busy node. This is a summary view of the provider. We have one of these screens for each object in the system. So you can see here certain attributes, as well as statuses where inventory refresh last happened. as well as relationships to other objects that this provider has. So let's talk a little about Ansible. So I won't talk a lot about Ansible because I think this is like the 9th or 10th talk about Ansible. I'll just mention a few items that we need to understand the demo. So you have your inventory in Ansible, which are the objects, lists of different objects that you are going to operate on. And you have your playbooks, which say what you are going to do. There is a special kind of playbooks which are called roles. They are kind of a subset. And these are playbooks that also include additional resources. For example, if you have an HTTPD role, as opposed to the playbook, the role might include also configuration templates that you might need, so all the files and resources that you need. Modules are the building blocks. And like you have a users module to create users, you have service modules to control services, etc. And Ansible is idempotent, which is the mathematical quality of having the same result whether you operate a function once or twice. Like the function absolute value, or if talking about what's interesting to us is deploying a server. Once you finish deploying it, you just want it to be up. You don't care if it was already there and you had to do nothing, or if you had to install it. Let's take a look at a real-life example. It was mentioned in the previous talk. It's a project called OpenShift Ansible. It's developed under the OpenShift umbrella, and it's used by all kind of people to deploy OpenShift clusters. So this is a regular inventory for deploying a 2-node cluster. So first we mentioned the objects that we are going to use. We have masters, nodes, NFS, and this is our NFS actual server. So let's see what you do with such an NFS. This is a playbook. So you can see this is the playbook that is going to turn the resource from the last slide to an actual NFS server. It's going to install NFS utils. It's going to configure a file, register the result of that in NFS config, and then if and only if the configuration change, it's going to actually restart the server, so the configuration will go into effect. Does anyone see a problem with that, by the way? Can anyone guess? So it's only starting the server. It's only restarting the server if the configuration change. What if we had a server that had already had NFS with this configuration, but it wasn't running? So it won't be restarted. So moving to manage IQ Ansible module. So the state we are currently now is, let's say we have a manage IQ instance is installed somewhere. We can either have that inside our OpenShift cluster that we manage, or outside. We can have it on a container. We can have it as a VM appliance. And we just provisioned a new OpenShift cluster. Let's say we did that using OpenShift Ansible, and now we would like to connect our new cluster to the Manage IQ environment and configure it. So this is where the Manage IQ Ansible modules come into play. They work on Manage IQ using its REST API, using a Python-based client, which is a natural choice for Ansible, which is Python. There are 4 existing modules. We have Manage IQ provider and user. These provide CRUD operations on these entities. And also with reporting if there were changes or there were no changes. The provider module will, after adding a new provider, will check the authentication, and if everything is valid, it will also schedule a refresh for all the objects from that provider. There is the policy assignment, which is, we talked previously about policies, so it allows you to connect the policies that you want on a specific target. We have the Manage IQ custom attribute, which are simply key value pairs, but they are quite powerful, and we will see why. So all of the modules support SSL verification, as well as configuring certain attributes of the Manage IQ instance you are working against in environment variables. So we will see a first demonstration of creating a new user. We will then add a provider to the environment. We will add some custom attributes, and we will assign a policy. Let's see how I am on time. Okay. Doesn't look very good. This looks a little better. Okay, so this is ManageIQ. You can see we have no providers, and the user is an administrator. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to add a user. Let's take a look at the playbook. So this is the name of the module, ManageIQ user. The names are very important in Ansible. They are descriptive, and we will be able to see the execution afterwards. You can see the user has some properties, and it belongs to a group. And these are the ManageIQ attributes, which will return in all of the playbooks. So let's run using the Ansible playbook command. Okay, so successfully created the user and all the attributes. Now, next we will use this user to log into the system. Not a very strong password. Okay, so this is our new user that we just created. Now we're going to go into compute, containers, and providers. You can see we have no providers in the system, and the next thing we would like to do is to add the new cluster that we installed to ManageIQ. So second playbook using the ManageIQ provider module. So you can see different attributes of the provider. What's interesting to note here is that we have two endpoints for this provider. That means that ManageIQ has to talk to two different entities. One is which they happen to be the same one because we have a route inside the cluster. But one is used to get inventory data from the Kubernetes and OpenShift master and for events. And the other one is the Hocular that we talked about that we collect metrics from. Let's run this playbook. This is going to take a little longer because, as we said, there's actually an authentication check against the entity that we are adding, which is the OpenShift cluster. It's optional, but if it succeeds, we can see that there was a successful addition. Both authentications are valid, and so an inventory refresh was scheduled. So now we are going to go into ManageIQ, and we will be able already to see all the objects of our environment. So this is our new provider. So you can see it has all the attributes that we mentioned, as well as the different endpoints, and already has a complete inventory of all the objects currently running inside the cluster. Next, we will take a look at the topology view for this provider, which kind of springs into view. So we can see all the different objects in the system. Okay, next, you can see that there are currently no custom attributes, or you couldn't see, but trust me. So this is a simple playbook. It's going to add those key value pairs. And this one, similarly to the next one, it has the entity on which we are going to operate, which is provider, identified by name, the Ansible state, name of the module. This is the inventory. So what's interesting is, because we said you can define policies in free language, here, for example, we have an expected number of nodes. So if we wish, we can define a policy. And this is something that the ops needed. We can define a policy that checks if the expected number of nodes is equal to the observed number of nodes that we actually get in the inventory. By the way, there are sections for the custom attributes, and the default one is metadata. OK, so they were added. We have two different lists for added and for updated. So all of these attributes were added. And now we will be able to see them in the system here. Yeah, and this is our expected number of nodes. OK, now to the last module. I think it's a little bit more interesting. So the last module is policy assignment. What we are going to do now is we are going to attach a compliance policy to our provider. And the policy is called our OpenSCA policy, which is a policy that we provide out of the box for container providers. We'll see it in a second. So again, we have our target entity, and we have the name of the policy that we want to attach. So attaching this to this provider. So of course, we have access to all of these things through the API. We're just showing the UI because it's nice. So currently, the policy is not assigned. Again, running Ansible playbook. So this is our last playbook. The policy was assigned to our provider. So the content of this policy is what we mentioned before. It's find out if a new image has suddenly appeared inside the cluster, and then smart state analyze it. And if it has, like, check CVE vulnerabilities against the latest content from the relevant source. And if it has any high severity vulnerabilities, it will both be marked as non-compliant in the system, and we will also annotate OpenShift in a way that OpenShift will know not to run containers based on that image anymore. So these are the different parts of that policy. And there is also the Explorer, the control, here it is, the Control Explorer, where you can really see what are the definitions of policies. OK. So this is the end of this demo. OK, so moving on to manage IQ automation. So obviously, it provides the ability to automate recurring tasks. The base design pattern, the automate works in our state machines, where you define different methods, which are states, and you define state transitions between them. If something goes well, go to this state. If something goes bad, go to that state. And it's quite powerful. We've did kind of complex things using this. For example, we have a feature of installing a complete cluster, an OpenShift cluster, using Ansible, OpenShift Ansible with the automate. So it's currently in Ruby. you define your different states in Ruby. But the Ansible team is working on having Ansible playbooks here as like first-class citizens, so you can just write Ansible if you want from the automation. We will keep the Ruby, but we will add to it. And you don't have access to the complete data model, but only to selected objects that we want to expose. And it's fully supported in the REST API, and you can also run it through the UI, which we'll see in the next demo. And you can import those from Git repositories, which allows you to use community-prepared automates. We call them automate domains. So next demo. Somehow it doesn't look that good. OK, so we've actually been using Ansible inside the automate for quite some time, although we do not yet have the Ansible syntax supported. So you'll see how to like run custom Ansible code using Ruby. So here we have a Rev provider. This is in compute infrastructure providers. And we are going to select VMs. These are all the VMs that are running inside the Rev provider. Let's go to a specific VM. This gives us access to Cockpit on that VM, and it's not installed currently. So this is going to be like a very simple example that will show how we are going to provision Cockpit on that VM. OK, so you can see the automate is namespace. We have our example general install Cockpit. And what you see here, we basically, it's a very simplified example. The actual code that we are using to deploy cluster is a little bit more complex. But what you can see, we are simply writing an Ansible playbook, dumping it into a file, and running it. So install Cockpit using the YAM module, start the service using a service module. And last, open firewall if necessary. Dumping it into a file. Obviously, when we did features using, yeah.
Actually, doing quite the same here inside the automation script that we do the configuration provider by connecting ManagerIQ to a tower and running the playbook from tower.
Right. Yeah, we will see that in a few minutes. We just didn't have this provider before, so this is what we used to do. But we will also see the tower provider. Thanks for the comment. It is kind of funny what we are doing here. So dumping into a file. This is the Explorer that allows us to run the simulation, allows us to run specific methods from the automate. We have parameters. And we run it, so you can see the namespace name of our method, installing Cockpit. So cool, install Cockpit, start and enable, and open the firewall. So that runs successfully. And again, this is an example of running Ansible, because this is kind of an Ansible tuck from the automation engine, but most of the automation isn't currently written in Ansible. But it will be great to have that integration soon. So we are going to the same VM. And we are going to open the console again. And by the way, if you haven't had a chance to look at the Cockpit project, I suggest you take a look at it. It's really easy to install. And they made some really interesting tech choices. So this is basically a user interface for Linux systems. Here you can see metrics, but you can also see that it's not collecting metrics while no one is connected to the UI. Only when you connect, it starts collecting the metrics through an agent. You can see the services. You can see containers. It's kind of, if you need to manage servers, kind of the first thing that I do before installing something more complex is usually Cockpit. Okay. Cool. So let's talk about the Ansible Tower provider. So Ansible Tower is not open source. It's like the enterprise solution that Ansible had around Ansible. It has UIs. We will talk a little bit about it in the next slide. But Red Hat is committed, and Ansible are committed to creating an open source project around the existing code base. You can read more about it here at ansible.com/opentower. So in the next release of ManageIQ, it's going to be included downstream, and upstream we are not going to install it, obviously, but we will give instructions on how to install it if someone wants, and in case it's installed, we'll know how to work with it. And it's a configuration manager, as mentioned. So what you can do, the first thing that you can do is you can just use playbooks inside ManageIQ from your Ansible Tower provider. Another thing that you get from this provider is you get a two-way sync, which means that you can, from one side, you can use hosts that come from ManageIQ inside your Ansible Tower to work on them as your inventory. And you can also use job templates. Job templates are an abstraction above roles that allow you to get very complex things done using just the minimum set of parameters that you really need to configure. So what are we going to do next? So first, we are working on new modules. We are adding the modules that we need, but we'd love for people, if someone finds it useful, we'd love for people to use it and maybe send some codes, send some patches. So currently we are working on policy modules, which allow not only to attach policies, but also to create them. And we would have some more advanced example playbooks. I just saw a PR this week. And for packaging, we are working towards having this in the Ansible Extras, which will mean it will come with every installation. And this is the repository where it is hosted. It's hosted in Daniel Korn's repository. This is Daniel. He originally wrote these modules. He loves snowboarding, contributing to open source. And this is his beloved football team. So to sum it all up, what we saw today is how to use ManageIQ to manage all of your environment. We saw Ansible used as a simple and powerful tool. And we saw the different flavors for combining ManageIQ and Ansible together, both using the modules to configure ManageIQ, from ManageIQ using the running Ansible, and using the provider integration. So these are the slides of this talk. This is a blog post I recently wrote about the policy bit, the OpenSCAP stuff, if you want to check it out. And that's it. Questions? Yes, go ahead.
Just dumping, another place where we're just dumping basically the YAML file and then just calling.
Yeah, we actually did that for production features, but in a little bit more complex manner. Sorry, repeat the question. So he asked, weren't we just dumping like YAML into files? So yeah, that's what we basically did. We did some features using that. The reason simply was that we wanted to leverage the automation solution that we had inside ManageIQ, and that we have the great OpenShift Ansible project. Obviously, we didn't want to rewrite code. It's a huge project. It supports like a vast majority of configurations. We didn't want to do something new, so we simply ran Ansible from the automation. Any other questions about ManageIQ in general? We might be able to answer those. Yes? Yeah, ManageIQ is the upstream. The downstream is called CloudForms, and they are very much in sync. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. So thank you very much for listening. Thanks. Nice. It's a little short.
Let's go back to the booth, show the ManageIQ. We forgot to tell about ManageIQ. We have a ManageIQ booth.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. I needed a sign for this. Cool.
We're keeping it open for an hour, 1 more hour.
I should have added it in my slides. That way I wouldn't forget
We
it.
started in the development version, also the bleeding edge, so Ansible wasn't working for the guy. That was the reason, because James Wong did the new game. That's why it wasn't working.
This is from
Here is the...
It's already here?
Yeah, I put it inside here,
Okay.
where it was hidden before. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Yeah, I'm coming.
So, you have examples of here of the use of AWS in your
Actually, the best resource I can recommend on Mike. The best resource I can recommend in the OpenShift Ansible project. Sure. They have examples. I think it's in examples/bio.
Okay. And so then I can pull that into the...
Yeah, and these are examples how to provision on AWS.
All right, I'll do that. Yeah, so I was looking at the OpenShift container version of that and thinking, okay, perfect opportunity to just push a simple OpenShift configuration up and look at it from the perspective of the manager to that was great. That's really helpful to see.
Yeah, but the OpenShift Ansible is amazing. They support everything. Thanks.
Congrats, sorry though.
Thank you. Thanks. it's fairly new. I think in later versions we'll probably try, like you, the best practices for clients and try to have it somehow like done automatically. When you get the new API version, you get Ansible for everything. But currently we are simply writing modules. We have 4 of them. They are for the main, we just thought what are the most important things for the first release. Sure. Yeah. Sorry. What are we talking on? Come later.
Testing, yeah. Is it? Testing, yeah. Perfect.
Also works.
Okay.
Okay, everything's fine.
Should I start at shop 2?
What?
I should start at 2? Yeah, or
Yeah, I think so.
okay.
So let me know if you will need something.
Sure.
Ja tu chciałem, tu jakiś jest API, nie?
Hey Josh, I'm at E112.
Yeah.
Yep. Like 2, yep. Okay. Talk. Yeah.
To see what will be please 3. You should turn your meeting off because you were talking.
Oh my gosh. Sorry.
It's here.
Okay, this is about turning it off. Okay.